Hi, and welcome to the Caterpillar Cross Stitch YouTube channel. My name's Ford from Son of a Stitch, and this week I'm going to be sharing with you the things that I most wish I had known when I started cross stitching. Now, I was pretty lucky when I first started cross stitching, and I had a dear friend who had done it most of their life and decided to teach me. And so I had kind of a head start on a lot of the techniques and tools that you might use rather than having to try to find my way on my own. So I got really lucky there, but there were still a lot of things that I learned as I went on that I really wish I had learned earlier on. So I'm going to share with you a bunch of those today. And the first one is I really wish I had known how long it takes. The very first project that I did was a very simple pattern. It was just a few words and kind of a floral accent, and I did it in a couple of days and I was like, yes, great. And so then I'm like, I'm going to make a present for someone. And I found a pattern and I started working on it. And so I went from like a 4x6 pattern with maybe 10% coverage to a 5x7 pattern on 18 count Aida with 100% coverage. So the first one took me a couple of days. The second one took me like 4 months to finish because I hadn't really thought about how much more work that was going to be. So I wish I had known how long it was going to take and how to guess and figure out how long a project was going to take, because that one almost put me off because it took so long to finish. Now, the number one technique I wish I'd known when I started out is called loop start. You've probably seen this in other videos, but just in case you haven't, I'm going to change your life right now. Check this out. With loop start, instead of using 2 strands of embroidery floss, which is what you use most of the time for cross stitching, you use 1 strand and you stick both ends of it through your needle. That gives you your 2 strands of floss. And so then you only have 1 end that you have to deal with. And in order to start your thread, you just start by sticking your needle through your fabric, pulling it most of the way through, making your first half stitch, and putting your needle through that little loop that was created. That's why it's called a loop start, is because you've made that loop. So now when you pull that tight, your first stitch is started and you don't have to worry about burying any ends. I spent a couple of years burying ends before I discovered loop start, and it has made my stitching so much faster and tidier. I really, really love it. I'm going to pause for just a second here to remind you to join the Caterpillar Cross Stitch VIP Stitch Club. When you join, you'll get an ebook with 8 free PDF cross stitch patterns in it, plus a year-long temperature tracking stitch-along pattern. You'll also get a download of our top 10 cross stitching tips, and you'll get the latest news on all the goings-on and the new products and new events at Caterpillar Cross Stitch. So if you want to make sure that you don't miss any future stitch-alongs or retreats, sign up for the VIP Stitch Club and you'll know ahead of time before those come out so that you don't miss out. Another technique I wish I'd known is how to get the strands out of a skein of floss. Once you've cut your length, I used to try to pull one end out, just unwinding it. But much later I learned that it was a lot easier if you just grab one strand and just pull. Hold loosely onto the rest of it and just pull on your one strand. It will all bunch up there under your thumb, and that strand will slide out easily, almost no matter how long it is, and then the rest of the strand will just fall back. So it's a much easier way to pull a strand out. The way I used to do it of trying to untwist it and unwind it was so time consuming. This is much, much easier. Another thing that took me a couple of years to learn that I wish I'd learned easier was the joy of needle minders. Not only are they cute, but they also save me a lot of time and hassle. I don't lose as many needles, and I don't risk accidentally inhaling one. I got into the habit of holding my needle in my mouth while I was working on my project, or when I was setting my project down, of tucking my needle into my fabric to hold it securely. Most of the time that's okay, but one time I set it down for a few weeks without working on it, came back, and it had permanently stretched out my fabric. And so there was a little mark there for forever, and every time I look at that piece, I see it. So I wish I had discovered needle minders as a way to save my needle and hold it in the position without damaging my project. And it's just so much faster and easier just to drop it on there. It's really fantastic. Another thing I wish I'd learned earlier on was the importance of keeping a project clean. When I first started out, I wasn't that fastidious about washing my hands before I got started. I figured I was going to wash it when I was done, so what did it matter? But my first couple of projects, there are permanent bits of hoop burn that I just could never wash or scrub out of the project. And I framed them in such a way that they're not visible mostly, but I know they're there. And they are visible just a little bit. So the importance of keeping my hands clean the entire time that I'm working on a project is a thing that it took me a while to learn. And one of the tips that I use for keeping my hands clean while I'm working on a project involves my accessory bag. So you've got my cute little caterpillar cross stitch bag here, and you can see that it's pretty dirty. All of the dirt that's on that bag is dirt that did not wind up in my project. So having something clean to keep it in helps a lot. But then when it comes to being able to snack while working, a pair of chopsticks is unbelievable. I can eat flamin' hot Cheetos while I'm working on my project, and you'll never know because of my chopstick. And one other thing I wish I had learned earlier on that I eventually did discover is the joy of online cross-stitching communities. The Caterpillar Cross Stitch Facebook group has over 20,000 members, which is hundreds of thousands of years of collective experience. So it's an enormous resource for someone who wants to get better at the craft, or to have people to bounce ideas off of, or to get feedback on your projects. So I highly recommend joining the Caterpillar Cross Stitch Facebook group, and go follow the Caterpillar Cross Stitch Instagram. Just a really tremendous community that if you're not taking advantage of it, you're missing out. Another thing I wish I'd known is how special those projects were going to be to me after I was done with them. The first few that I did, it was just kind of a gag and a lark, and it was not that important to me. So I framed them in a really clumsy and sloppy way. Like I said, I didn't wash my hands very well while working on them, and I wound up with dirty projects and like very badly framed ones. Like one of them, I used duct tape to hold it into the frame. And that worked fine, it looked okay, but I pulled it out of the frame to wash it and redisplay it recently, and duct tape, it might surprise you to learn, is not photo safe. It's not acid free. So the adhesive in the duct tape had permanently discolored a bunch of the fabric, even fabric that it wasn't touching. Just the acidity fuming off of it had actually ruined some of the project and some of the fabric. So I wish I'd known how important they were going to be and taken better care of them from the start. I also wish I had known earlier on that not all needles are created equal. I just grabbed the first ones that I saw when I first started stitching, and I didn't really know any better. And it wasn't until much later when I was in a specialty stitching store and I saw some quality needles, the ones that I wound up buying were Boan on the shelf, and started using them, that I realized how much of a difference the quality of the needle can make in terms of how easy it is to pull through the fabric, how long it lasts, how much it hurts my fingertips, and how much it frays and damages the floss in the process of stitching. So getting quality needles seems like a indulgence, but it actually really makes a big difference in the process and in the finished project. So I wish I had understood that earlier on. Now, the person who taught me how to cross stitch taught me the importance of keeping the back of the project clean, keeping it tidy, not running the thread too far, keeping your stitches all going in the same direction, that kind of thing. And I'm really glad that I learned those things, but I wish that I had understood that the back is only important insofar as it affects how the front looks. So keeping your stitches going in a consistent direction helps keep your stitches from getting in the way of one another and having tension in weird directions. Not running your thread too far across the back keeps it from getting snagged, and it allows you to keep tension in your stitches so that they're not just all loose and wobbly on the surface. So what happens on the back matters, but it only matters insofar as it affects the front. So all of these rules that I had for myself, I wish I had known that those rules are not important. What's important is how it actually looks when you're done, and even just your ability to finish and to enjoy the process. So the rules are a really helpful way to make sure that I get the end result that I want, but I wish I had known that all of these rules that I learned of you have to do it this way, you have to do it this way, you have to do it this way, those are inherited wisdom from people who've been doing it for generations. But each of those rules is going to have exceptions, and I can take and leave them as I want, depending on the result that I want. Now, that second project that I did that I told you about, I really, really wish I had known about gridding. I wish I had known about marking on the fabric so that you have an absolute point to count from occasionally other than just stitches that you've already done. It would have made it a lot easier to keep track of where I was and what I had done, and I would have made a lot fewer mistakes. I'm going to make a video about one of my favorite techniques of gridding in the near future, but it's just something that I wish someone had taught me. And there's another technique that I didn't learn until just a couple of years ago that I wish I had known much earlier, and it's called railroading. I made a video about it. You should go and check that out. But it's a really great way to help keep your stitches a little more consistent and a little more tidy. For me, a big part of the fun of cross-stitching is being as exact and precise as I can, because I want to have a really neat, tidy result. I know that's not everyone's style, but that's the way I like to do it. And railroading is a technique that doesn't cost me any extra time. It's very, very simple, doesn't require any extra tools, and makes my stitches much, much neater. The super short version is that with each stitch, rather than just going down through the fabric, you put your needle between your two strands of floss. That's it. The floss, as it goes down through itself, will keep those two pieces of floss separated, so that when they hit the surface of the fabric, they are more likely to lay parallel to one another. That'll give you more consistent stitch tension, that'll give you more consistent stitch tidiness, and it will make the project look a little fuller when you're done as well. So that's a super simple thing that I didn't learn until a couple years ago that I wish I'd known sooner. Another thing I learned is that not all hoops are created equal. I was in the craft store and I saw hoops, and there were $12 hoops and there were $3 hoops, and I'm like, these are wood, those are wood, why would I spend 4 times as much money? Wasn't until maybe even just the last year or so that I tried a good quality hoop from a good quality manufacturer, again from Boan, although I hear the Nerge ones are super, super nice as well, and realized that it actually makes a really big difference in the process of stitching. The shape of it, the way it's machined, the way it's finished, it grips the fabric better. The hardware on the hoop is a lot better as far as being able to tighten it down. And for something that you're going to use over and over again, spending money on a quality hoop is actually worth it. I wish I'd known that. Another thing I wish I'd known is just that things that seem hard when you start out in stitching get a lot easier, and you'll get a lot better at them. Things like stitching over 2 on linen or even weave fabric. When you first do it, it's super confusing and very intimidating, but before very long, it's just second nature, and you find that it doesn't cost you any extra time. So just how easy it is to pick up those things once you have the basics is a really, really great lesson that I learned. What about you? Is there something that you didn't get taught at the beginning that you would learn much later that you really wish you'd known all along? Leave it in the comments down below, and maybe you'll be able to change another stitcher's life as well. I do want to thank you so much for watching. Please make sure that you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave me a comment. That's how my performance is tracked, and it really, really helps me out when you do that. For Caterpillar Cross Stitch, my name is Ford, and I will see you next time.